So have you ever been excited about something? Maybe like a TV show or a movie or a restaurant until you went online and then you read the comments and you saw how negative they were, and then it kind of made you question, is this actually good? And that's how I kind of feel about this new show on Disney Plus called Doogie Kamealoha MD. It's a brand new show. It takes place in Hawaii. And to talk about the show, I thought I'd bring you here. This is where they film the episodes. This is the fictional hospital in the actual show. And if you are familiar with at least the first episode, this is the lawn where the dad parks the shave ice truck and all the people come out and they eat. I mean, I enjoy shows that are filmed or take place in Hawaii. I mean, one of my favorites is Lost. And you know, Disney Plus has been doing a pretty good job. They had The Mandalorian, they had Mighty Ducks, and even Big Shot I thought was pretty great. And so when they announced this show coming, I thought, okay, I'm gonna give it a try since it takes place in Hawaii. But then I read some of the comments online. IMDb, 5 out of 10 stars, pretty brutal. And the thing is, if you just watch the trailer, okay, I can see where some of the complaints are. The trailer, not really so great, but it's just a trailer. It's not even one episode of the show. And yes, I'm a guy in my 30s talking about a show geared towards teenagers, primarily teenage girls, but I'm trying to look at the show through more of a cultural lens. By cultural lens, I mean a Hawaii culture and not a native Hawaiian culture. Very, very big difference, by the way. But that's how I'm looking at this show, and I guess that's okay, right? Now, the premise of the show is inspired by, not a continuation of, the original Doogie Kamealoha MD from the 1990s. And I think a lot of people are kind of caught up on that. They think that it's somehow supposed to be a continuation, when in fact, I think it's pretty apparent, at least based on the trailer and of course the first episode, that no, it's not a continuation of. That show actually existed within the world of this new show. And it's really just about this young girl, Lahela, who is a young doctor. She's a genius, and she grows up here in Hawaii, and she has to balance her teenage life with her professional life as a doctor here. By the way, I think they film something over there. I just feel like they filmed something over there, at least in maybe the first episode. I don't know, just looks like it. And I think some local people feel like this show should be made just for locals, but the thing is, if it was made just for locals, it'd be pretty boring. And so instead, I think the show is geared towards more a mainland, mainstream audience, and I think that's absolutely fine. But if you pay attention to the show, clearly there are a lot of little tiny Easter eggs and references just for us locals that no one outside Hawaii will really understand, and I can talk about some of those things. There are so many Hawaii references in this show already, just based on the first episode, that I'm kind of surprised they made it into the final script. I mean, the mentioning of Zippies twice, I think, was brilliant. It's something that locals will understand, and no one outside of Hawaii will even know what Zippies is. By the way, Zippies is like a diner, like a Denny's, I guess, but it just serves a lot of local food. And in the show, Zippies is referenced as a place that people go to hang out and just talk. And that's absolutely true. If you grew up in Hawaii, yeah, that's what you did after. I mean, there were so many times that after like I hung out with my friends, we didn't know what to do. It was getting kind of late. It's like, okay, what do we do, right? And of course, we go to Zippies, right? There's like 10 of us, right? Sitting down, and we get maybe a Simon and some French fries, and we're there for like 2 hours just talking story. And yeah, that's something that we actually do. But one of the best moments that I was like, oh, that's pretty funny, was when they're just about to leave, and then the 2 aunties appear in the window, and they're trying to take pictures for the mom because it's such a big deal. And then the dad opens the door and sees like all these people, right? All the family, all the cousins, aunties, uncles, like they're all outside just wanting to take pictures. And that's totally relatable in Hawaii because yeah, Hawaii people, we have big families and a dialogue. And I think that's important because dialogue is part of the characters, right? And the way that the show is written, I think they do a really great job of incorporating local pidgin. And it's not to the point where it's dumb, because I think oftentimes in movies or television, whenever they incorporate pidgin, right, that one character, that one like trope character, they just sound so dumb. But the pidgin that's used in this show, it's not dumb, it's just very subtle. You know, words like how's it and no worries and, you know, all those types of references, they're great. But it's not like there's just one token character who is just spouting pidgin and people just don't get it, right? And so I think that's really good that they incorporate the pidgin, but not so much that it's distracting. And so when I hear the complaint that, oh, that's not the real Hawaii, well, of course not. It's not the exact real Hawaii. And honestly, even for locals, the real Hawaii is different depending on how long you've lived here, where you live. I mean, it can be pretty different from someone who lives in downtown versus someone who lives out maybe in the countryside, right? Hawaii is going to be very different, and so you can't really capture all of that. But I think it does a pretty great job of not just making Hawaii the background. And that's something that the creator and executive producer, Courtney Kang, actually tried to do. I mean, she said in an interview with the Honolulu Star Advertiser that she just didn't want Hawaii to be this background, right? Like, she wanted to incorporate some of the local culture and a lot of little small references that hopefully locals can enjoy. And I think we actually see that in the show. I mean, at least in the first episode, there are a couple of what I'd call teaching moments where the show is subtly and comedically teaching certain things about Hawaii, and it's so subtle, but it's something that I noticed as a local, and I appreciate that. In one of the scenes, there's this woman who is buying shave ice from the dad, and she says mahalo, and the dad has to correct her, mahalo, because language is important, and that shows that language is important. I made a video about common mispronounced words in Hawaii, and mahalo, that was one of the words that I had mentioned because, yeah, I totally get it, and it's completely understandable. And so for someone who's watching the show, hopefully they understand, like, oh yeah, like, it is important to say the words properly, and if you are corrected, it's okay, you know? And there's also one of the other characters in this show. I think his name is Charles. He's one of the doctors, and clearly he's not from Hawaii. And in the first episode, they kind of make light of the fact that he's still learning. You know, he's still learning. Like, he goes outside and he orders a cherry icy when he means a shave ice, and he doesn't quite know that it's a poke bowl, not Pokemon bowl, and how to use the shaka properly. And it's through things like that, it's through a character like him that hopefully people will kind of understand, like, oh, they'll kind of learn a little bit about Hawaii, because this character who moved here in the show is still learning about Hawaii. And the struggles of that doctor are very relatable. I've worked with so many people who are from the mainland, and it takes them years sometimes to figure out how Hawaii culture works, especially when it comes to language. And that's totally understandable, because I know that when I was away on the mainland, it took me a while to get used to how they would say things. For example, the first time I heard the word pop, I had no idea what they're talking about, but it means soda. So it's just gonna take time. And I think maybe over the course of the show, the first season, that character will start to learn some things about what it means to live in Hawaii. So let's talk about characters in the show. But before we do that, let's actually go down to the beach or the ocean, which is actually right there. For those who have watched the show, you'll remember that when the shave ice truck was actually right here on the lawn, the dad was just like, oh, let's go to the beach, let's go to the water. And he's like pointing over there. And there actually is the ocean right there. So let's go. Okay, give me a sec. We're almost there, okay? Not as young as I used to be. Whew, looks like a nice day. All right, there it is. Oh boy. I gotta do more cardio. And I know that one of the biggest complaints about this show is the lead character, Lahela, is not played by someone who is native Hawaiian or someone who is even from Hawaii. So I get that. And better representation for certain types of roles, totally understand that argument. But I guess what I'd have to say is, have you seen the rest of the cast? I mean, there are at least 3 characters who have ties to Hawaii. They're from Hawaii. And while that doesn't make up for the casting of the lead character, I thought that the casting was pretty great, because when I first saw her, and I'd never seen her before in any other show, she kind of reminded me of, if you're from Hawaii, you know this newscaster, Kim Janala. She looks like a younger Kim Janala, or is it just me? But what I mean by looking at the rest of the cast is, like, look at the diversity of the cast. And it's not diversity for diversity's sake. It's diverse in that it represents what I think, just as someone who lives here, the population looks like now. I mean, you have a Hapa child, you have a Caucasian mom, you have a local dad who I think is supposed to be Hawaiian, maybe Chinese, a Caucasian best friend. You have one of the surgeons who looks like he immigrated from, like, China, just purely based on his accent. And then you have 2 other doctors, one of whom is local, and she's actually played by someone who is from Hawaii, she's from Maui. And then you have another doctor who is from the mainland. And so I thought that the casting of the rest of the cast was pretty great. And it's one thing, because I didn't actually notice it. I almost missed how good the casting was because it just is so natural to me. I mean, I walk around and yeah, it's pretty mixed. And I think that they did a really great job of encompassing like, yeah, Hawaii is now becoming this even greater place that's mostly mixed. Although I will say they probably could have casted a few more Filipino nurses just, you know, for authenticity. But what's great about this whole discussion, because let's face it, we're talking about a TV show here geared towards kids. But what it brings up is, why is it so important that Hawaii, of all places, be accurately portrayed? Or why is it so important? Like, why do people care so much here? And I think it's because for so long, Hawaii is often used in mainstream media as just like this background. And oftentimes it feels like these shows or these movies, they kind of just take all the best things of Hawaii and just kind of like twist them. And, you know, as a local, I'm looking at that like, that's not how Hawaii is. And these shows just continue to take and take, but they're never really giving back what it's really like to live here. And maybe people don't want to know what it's like to live in Hawaii, like for real. But I hope that, you know, YouTube channels like mine and others kind of show like, oh, okay, that's kind of how it's like. It's kind of like real life, but it's not, you know, just beaches and surfing. And it is some of it for some people, but it's not always like that. Because I think often what's shown on television or in movies is like this illusion. And I think people like that illusion. You know, they like hula girls and Waikiki and drinking out of coconuts and pineapples. Like, they like that. But as locals, we all know that that's not really how it's like. That's just what we want people to kind of think. So I think all that to say, give the show a chance if you're local. Just give it a chance. You know, it's a comedy, it's a family comedy. It's supposed to be geared towards teens, but you know, just give it a chance. Just enjoy the show, the small little references. I know there's gonna be probably continuity errors and it's like, no, that beach is not over there. And I know that, But it's just nice to see that Hawaii is portrayed what I think is pretty well. Like, it's a pretty good show, especially if you look at it through a local cultural lens, like a Hawaii lens. It's like, it's one of the best shows that I've seen that does and sneaks in these little references that are just for us local people. So I say give it a chance. So thanks for watching, and aloha.